Hello. I'm Mitch.
Hey,
Hello. I'm going to do a little intro and then we'll just get into the conversation.
cool.
My name is Mitchell Matthews of Mitchell Matthews Media. And today, very special video. We have the inspiration for the name of our channel. And it's a big event. It's almost when you're seeing this, 6 years ago, will be the first video I did on this channel. It was an interview with this man right here. I'll let him introduce himself and all his wonderful achievements. But we are sitting down talking with Julian Gray of Julian Gray Media today.
That's me. Yeah, so 6 years ago, me and Mitchell here did a interview before I was doing anything that I'm doing now, when I had first started my YouTube channel. And I'm just excited to catch up and to like discuss maybe some of the same questions you had years ago now and see how things have changed, because it's definitely been a wild ride since 2015. So
Yeah, I went back in the video. I rephrased some of the questions just because
yeah.
that was like one of the first interviews I've ever done, so it was a little awkward.
Oh yeah.
I've come a long way in this, but it's basically all the same questions from 6 years ago, circa the Billie Eilish Vanity Fair interview. So,
Yeah.
I'm excited, but I mean, first of all,
thank you for having me back on the show.
Of course. I mean, I have my questions, but I just want to say, I've never gotten to say this to you face to face. I mean, congratulations. You've exceeded all my expectations. You did some great work, but I couldn't imagine how far you've come by the time.
Oh, I appreciate that, man. I mean, thank you so much.
Mousetrap, that's insane.
Yeah.
We'll get into that. Actually, yeah, we'll get into that.
Absolutely.
Chronologically. But yeah, so basically this interview we'll touch on, for everybody watching, we'll touch on stuff current day, but a lot of these questions are going to be just his take on the same questions from 6 years ago. So, I mean, first of all, you said you started YouTube right around our first interview. How did you get your start on YouTube?
Oh, man. Well, I think I probably answered the same way back then, but I started making tutorial videos for friends in whatever it was, middle school or high school back then. And one of my tutorials just happened to do really well. And when you're, 15 or 16 and you have a video that gets 10,000 views, and you're like, oh man, I should keep doing that. So I made a series on virtual DJ that evolved into Ableton, and then from Ableton into a variety of just a lot of other videos in relation to audio software. And that's kind of where the channel sits right now. I'm less active on the channel these days just because I've kind of pivoted towards more solo artist stuff and that sort of thing, but I still upload on the channel to this day. Maybe less so and more obscure topics than back in 2015 when we first talked. But that's how I started the channel, and it's just evolved and grown so much from there, and I'm really proud of everything I've done on there. I think at the time we did that video, I was probably like 10,000 subscribers or something. Now we're like over 40, almost 50,000. And
congratulations.
Yeah. And if I kept at that grind speed I was doing in 2017 or whatever, I might be like 100,000 by now. But I'm proud of what the channel has become.
Yeah, I hinted at it at the start of this. I don't know if I've ever told this to you, but I mean, I made YouTube channels. I've had like 6 different ones, and I started middle school, and it was always like one topic each. So it's like sketches, random sketches, art, tech, it was always just one or the other, and that's why I kept making more. And then I'm like, when I started this channel, I wanted to combine everything, just do whatever I want, whenever I want, because YouTube's a passion. I don't expect to take it to a full-time career, but it's always been something I love. And when I heard about you through one of my friends from high school, it's like Julian Gray Media, that was the perfect way to sum up what I wanted to do. And I'm sorry if I stole that.
No,
it's
you
kind of
absolutely not. I mean,
it's lovingly.
I always say my YouTube brand is developed from my naive, I guess, sense of admiration towards a lot of tech YouTubers. Like the Hey Guys is from Austin Evans for sure. The of Julian Gray Media is from like Review Tech USA. He's a tech channel. And then like I kind of just base the way I teach on like Linus Tech Tips or MKBHD. I'm very much like a tech guy first, and music like has become the thing I do, but fundamentally I've always been more interested in like, you know, computers and tech and all that sort of stuff. And a lot of the channels I used to watch are really the inspiration for all of my quote unquote brand. So you're stealing from a thief in that regard. But I think that there's like, you know, guidelines to YouTube where everyone's kind of doing the same thing anyway. So I don't take any personal, you know, offense to that. I think it's, if anything, it's complimentary.
Well, I've evolved it from, well, you're like Julian Gray Media. I did kind of the same thing. I've kind of evolved it to like, this is Mitchell Matthews from Mitchell Matthews Media, and welcome to Mitchell Matthews Media. And then it's become like an inside joke with my friends, just because
Right.
A lot of M's, just very self-effacing. But
I face the same thing in my work. Like everyone's always like, "Hey, it's Julian of Julian Gray Media."
Like people say the entire thing when I say
right, exactly.
It's hilarious. But it's also cool to hear those names like Austin Evans and MKBHD, because I haven't watched them in a while. I did watch those guys in middle school.
Yeah, I still regularly watch them. I'm you know, I have a finger on the pulse of what's happening in the tech universe, because that's fundamentally my, you know, my love is tech, and all of the things I do are derivative of what's going on in tech. So definitely still, you know, a huge nerd in that regard.
Yeah, I know you're a big Apple guy, and I'm also a big Apple guy, so I felt a connection there as well. You met Tim Cook, which is crazy.
That was a highlight of my life. I consider myself more of like a tech guy. It just happens to be that Apple does some of the best products, and I'm just really enthusiastic about, you know, really exciting new products and technology. Like I'm equally excited for Windows 11 as Mac OS Monterey, but people wouldn't think that. I'm very like outwardly an Apple guy, but I love, you know, all of the new developments. I just think that they are so ahead of the game as far as, you know, how great their products are.
Is there like an overall product from any realm of tech that you like the most, or is it like, can you pick and choose like the best product from everybody?
That's tricky because
a personal favorite.
So many. What's that?
At least a personal favorite, if not the best.
It's tricky because there's so many different product categories, and there's so many things I use every day. I mean, I use my iPhone probably the most out of anything. Maybe my computer. I use a Mac Mini. I also love like a Nintendo Switch for portable gaming, and, you know, an Xbox. I have one of those too. So I couldn't pick like one overarching thing. I guess I have one thing of every category, and those are probably them.
Gotcha. And then also, like, I see the Jim Henson Think Different poster. My dad actually has the same one in his basement.
Yeah, I was going to mention when you were talking about Apple, I have the 1997 Think Different Jim Henson. My girlfriend's a huge Henson fan, so it's like appropriate because it's a match of our like loves and our inspirations.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then this was kind of a sub question I asked years ago. I mean, when I started YouTube in middle school, I had some friends who were like doing all the big things at the time, and collab channels, lip syncs. And one of my friends from high school went to VidCon, like right when it first started, which was really cool. And like when I started, of course, it was just to have fun, but also like in my mind, I'm like, I would love to blow up in early YouTube, which was, you know, the cornerstone of media in some ways. So it's like, did you ever have that intention? Like, I would love to blow up, or was it just, it's just you did it and then it took you somewhere and you rolled with it?
I think when anybody starts on YouTube, it's really for just being enthusiastic about creating something cool. And as you progress down that path, it becomes more and more about you know, numbers games and growing and trying to create something better than the last. But recently, I mean, I've had so many life changes over the past like 5 years that now I'm growing away from that inevitability of social media numbers and stuff, and I'm trying to really dial in regardless of how things perform, I want to create something that I really love or really care about. That's why my output on YouTube has really slowed down over the years. Is just I want to focus on projects and concepts that people like me would be passionate about, or things that I would personally love to create, rather than grind out videos every week, try to fall into the trap of trying to explode.
I mean, I've heard that discussion before. A lot of people spend so much time aiming to get those numbers, and then when they get those numbers, it's cool, but it's like a guarantee. It's just numbers at some point. I mean,
Yeah.
so do you relate to that? Like, you just shifted away from caring. Like, something you do is going to do at least decently well. So
Right.
Is it just making it the best it can be and not aiming for a big number?
I think that numbers are always kind of gratifying. It's just kind of human nature to receive affirmation and find that as really gratifying. But I think that you know when you look at these huge accounts, or like huge influencers, quote unquote, that have these huge numbers, they see numbers in the same way that you see numbers, in that I have 1,000 followers. To someone with 0 followers, they might see me as a big channel, or like they might wish they have 1,000. But somebody has 1,000,000 followers would see somebody with 1,000 or 1,000, and they would say, you have so many followers, I wish I had that. It's always this ever growing thing of trying to get bigger, and it's always the context in which you're looking at, like the perspective. Because somebody with that many followers is probably thinking, I don't have 50 million followers, and it's something that has really rang true for me over the years. When you fall into that trap of that mindset, you end up never being satisfied, because the only thing that's satisfying you is growth. Yeah. And if you release something that doesn't resonate with people, even if it's great content, or a great idea, sometimes it just doesn't perform, and then it ends up damaging your enthusiasm or your mental health, and that's just a really unhealthy relationship. So it's something I'm trying to get away from over the past few years, I think, because it's all about perspective. Everyone who's like a huge influencer is probably just chasing after a bigger number. You never feel like you've, like, quote unquote, made it.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's also something I've tried to work on, because I haven't reached your success level per se, but like I also get stuck on comparing myself to my other friends who do better than me numbers wise. And it's like, I think the big thing is like, maybe a song mine hasn't taken off. Maybe this thing isn't world famous yet, but it's like, aside from numbers, there's so many little achievements that I've gotten to do that are really cool that nobody else, not a lot of people I know, can say. And it's like, yeah, maybe I'm not here, but like I've done all this, and that's good enough for me. So I try,
and
try to stick with
that's that's the most important thing, is to look at what you have accomplished, and really look at it from, or try to look at it from, an outside perspective of like, oh wow, that's something really cool that I've done that I take for granted, I think.
Yeah. And then, okay, you said earlier, tech's always been your big thing, and music's kind of taken that over just because it's your full-time career now. I mean, when did you start making electronic music? And was that before or after YouTube kind of started for you?
Yeah, I started out when I was young, building computers and fixing computers and servicing. I had, parts that I would piece together, Windows computers. I would fix up my friends' Macs and stuff. I used to have like a series of old Power Macs I used to play with. But then I think my grandmother got one of the old iMacs, the white ones when they first came out, the first Intel iMac, I think, and it had GarageBand on it, and I started to play with that, and I really discovered, how flexible electronic music could be. Then one day, my dad brought home a demo program. He used to work as a guitar teacher, and he bought some sort of like interface or something, and it included a demo of a program, and I wrote an album in like this demo DAW that I had. And between that and like the GarageBand stuff, I really fell in love with electronic music. And I've always been like that. Like, digital art in general has been the most influential thing to me, I think. Writing music or creating art or design or what have you, anything to do with creativity mixed with a computer has really been, my biggest focus since the very beginning. I think that this is all around the time I was doing YouTube. There was a very weird like niche interest of mine, which was like DJing, that I got into. And I was, like I said in the first question, I was making tutorials for that. And then my love of writing music caught up to that. So I was writing music, I was DJing, and I was teaching on YouTube, like DJ tutorials, and that evolved into Ableton tutorials. And then Ableton is the marriage of writing and performing music. And that's, really where I really found my stride, is when I related that niche interest of like learning to DJ and, this subtle interest of writing music together.
That's really cool. And then since we connected like 6 years ago, I mean, I've seen like you've talked about how important your parents or your brother is to like, your life, and just how your tastes and how everything's shaped together through them. I mean, how have they reacted to like everything you've been able to do in the past like 6 years?
Oh, my family's really supportive of what I do. I think that everyone is kind of a reflection of their parents, or if not their parents, then like the people they're closest to. And my parents are fundamentally musical. Like my mother was into new age and new wave music back in the 80s, 90s, and my dad is like a guitar teacher and studio musician. So it was kind of like a shoe-in that I would be in music. That's just
That's really cool.
They've been supportive since day one.
I'm glad to hear it. And then you touched on it a little bit. Music's obviously important, but I mean, something I always admired about you, something I try to do as well. I mean, you have talents in other fields. I mean, web design, graphic design, cinematography. We talked about photography, etc. You really manage every aspect of your brand. You're a Renaissance man in that sense. So it's like, was that always the case? Is it just your curiosity just drives you to do all these single things? And is it important for you, or just as an artist, to have hands-on in every single facet of a brand besides the main focus?
I think it was more important to me like 5 years ago to be the head of every single creative decision on my brand. But now I still am very active in everything I do, and I think it ascends from this obsession with learning new digital creative tools. And that falls back again to my obsession with tech and new software. I always just want to learn how to do things, like graphic design, design in general, digital illustration, digital art, music, of course, motion graphics and video stuff. It's all stems from like doing cool creative stuff on a computer, and that interest that I had as a child. And it still is used every day. I do design work for my music releases, for my collective Gradient, for my YouTube channel, or, maybe even like motion graphics or video or 3D design for song visuals for a live show. But I think that it all fundamentally is derived from that passion for tech.
And then like, I think for me, a lot of the creative stuff I pursue, I mean, obviously there's a drive to be hands-on and everything, but also, I mean, when you're just starting out, there's kind of like a need to have to be in control of everything. You have to do everything yourself if you're doing it as a solo venture. I mean, with the success you've had, have you been able to kind of release the reins a little bit, like hand off aspects to other people? Like someone else handles this, someone else handles that, like ease your workload, or I mean, are you still pretty involved?
Yeah, I think, however old I was when I was in 2015, maybe like 17 or something, you feel the need to be completely in control, or like you have to have that gratification of doing everything yourself. Otherwise, like, you're not like a true artist, or you have like this idea that complete control is what makes a great artist. And that's something that I think you grow out of. You realize that collaboration and finding people that share your vision and inspire you, and working with teams like that are, fundamentally more powerful. Steve Jobs has a great quote about this, where like the Beatles were great musicians on their own, but they're never the Beatles until they became the Beatles, or something along those lines. Don't quote me the exact uh, quote, but something along those lines. And I fundamentally agree with that. Um, Teamwork is something that makes great creative work, I think. And you can do great work by yourself, but having the inspiration and ideas of other incredible creatives that share your vision is also equally important. And it's something I didn't realize when I was 17.
I definitely relate to all of that, but so that's good to hear. Um, so the next question, I got a number of your songs, like they're written and produced by you solely, and then you do a lot of collaborations, or you have a lot of guest vocalists on songs as well. It's not just fully you. I'm curious, like part one, like how often are you the singer on a song? Like, do you typically
Yeah,
hand it off to somebody else, or is it like do you ever step into that like role?
that's been a newer development the past few years. I For the longest time I was so self-conscious about my voice, but I grew up in choir, and I just never utilized my singing ability. So in the past like 2 or 3 years, I've been trying more and more to utilize it in my music. Um, but that doesn't mean I don't collaborate a lot. Like
Yeah.
I would say like the ratio is maybe like for every 10 songs I'll sing maybe two or three.
Okay.
um, and I just like to work with incredible singers who are also great songwriters. I could have never written, let's say, my newest track, Air. The vocalist on that one really, brought in the energy and the story that the song needed. Um, so I always, I'll try my own vocals if I think that it works on a song, but I'm never hesitating to work with other creatives.
And congratulations on Air. It's a really great song.
Thank you.
The vocalist is fantastic as well.
I agree. Forts is incredible, and they're incredible songwriters. So
And I will lead into that in a minute, but like just to kind of touch on the last part of that question, I mean, when you're making a song, um, how do you know like you just need somebody else? Like you said, a lot of guest vocalists can bring in the energy or encapsulate the story that the song's going for. How do you get to that point? When do you realize, oh, I need to bring somebody else in? Or how do you pick your collaborations? Is it just I want to collaborate with this person, or man, this person would really fit?
I think it varies from song to song. Sometimes I'll find a vocalist first, and I'll be writing something to their specifications. So if I know how they sound and I know what would work with their voice, I'll write a song around them. And then a lot of times I'll write a song and then I'll be like, this vocalist would sound incredible on this song. Let me see if I can get them on it. And if not them, then someone similar. And that's kind of how it works. Sometimes, I know how I sound, and if I think that my voice or my songwriting style would work on a record, then that's the voice I go with. But I use the same like A&R ability on whether it goes either way. Uh, Whether I think it would fit my voice or someone else who's a better singer than I.
And is it easier to, in the A&R sense, get to work with people now that you're part of a major label or have a little success under your belt, or is it still like you're kind of sending that email, crossing your fingers that they'll respond?
I think it definitely adds a sense of legitimacy when you put, whatever label you've worked with in your email subject line. Um, there's always a chance when you're getting started. If you have a good enough song and you send it to the right person, the right singer, there's a good chance you'll get a response just based on how good the song is. But it definitely helps in getting them to listen to the song in question if you have Mousetrap and Anjunabeats and Enhanced in your subject line, for example. So that, I think, more than anything, that might be it. Also, you just meet a lot of people over the years. If you're in that space, you meet a lot of collaborators of artists that you respect, and then it's just a stone's throw away. You can just ask them based on your affiliation with someone else, and that's how I've found a lot of my most recent vocalists.
And then a lot of these questions are kind of based on the last interview, but like
Yeah.
specific question, like doesn't really fit. Like, tell us about your recent single run. That simply doesn't fit. But like, I mean, before we go into air, how do you look? It's been like 6 years. How do you look back on your older work, like Run or like Spare Change EP, and how do you compare that to where you are now?
Yeah, I had this conversation actually with this new artist. Her name is Lupa. She's a techno artist. She's just getting started the past like 2 years or something. She's been following the channel for a few years. We had a meeting the other day. And I actually, because she had brought up the idea of like, I don't know if I love this song from like a year ago. I'm thinking about deleting it and stuff. And I actually had this epiphany recently that like, you go through a cycle of I really love this song, it's brand new, it's really exciting, and then about a year after that you're like, I don't know if I really love that song, should I really put that out? And then maybe 2 years later you're like, I really don't love that song, I think I'm going to delete it. And some people do, and I'm guilty of that as well. I've deleted songs from my Spotify or whatever like a year or two after. And then I would say as you grow years and years later, I realized this when I did an anthology of Julian Gray set recently, where I played every song I ever wrote. It you become nostalgic for the old music, and you fall in love with it once again. So there are songs like from 2 years ago, I'm like, I don't know if I love those, but if I listen back to like 2015 Julian or like 2016, I'm like, wow, I really love those songs for what they were at the time, and like how they made me feel, and I'm nostalgic for that era. And I fell in love with those songs again just listening back to them again. So I think that the answer is really, it's a cycle. You fall in love with your old music as you go on. Maybe 5 years from now, maybe I'll hate it once again. But I think that you learn to appreciate your older music and your roots as you progress as an artist. So don't be tempted to erase old stuff, because you might find yourself loving it 5 years from now and end up like me and regret deleting some of it.
The music you deleted, is that like, does it exist anywhere? Like, do you at least have it like in your?
I'm sure it exists somewhere, SoundCloud or something, but no longer on Spotify. And now I'm like, do I really want to go through the effort of putting it out again? So
it could be,
I
like
don't know,
a B-sides album, Julian Gray.
Yeah, I'm thinking about doing something like that, like an anthology album where it's just stuff that I used to write that never made the light of day. I think it could be really interesting.
No, that'd be cool. But then, of course, your new single "Air," which is, again, fantastic, with Forts and you pronounce that 28 mm or
28 millimeter.
28 millimeter. It just dropped. What is the story and the process behind making that? How did it come to be? How did it see the light of day?
Yeah, so Air was initially a collaboration between me and 28 millimeter. A little bit of backstory on that. 28 millimeter, his name is Christian, and I met him in 2016 actually, which is not far off from when I met you. And he was attending Icon Collective, so he was in Burbank. I was living with a roommate in Simi Valley, so I would take the train about an hour over to his house, crash at his place, and we would just write music and hang out and go to shows and stuff. We met over a mutual love and an aspiration of being a mousetrap artist, and also just really into deadmau5 and that whole scene. And we've been working on music ever since like 2015 or 16 when we first met. Never really landing something that we thought would be appropriate to release, like good enough to release, until maybe like a year ago. He sent me this really cool idea, and a lot of people believe that in Air the main lead counter melody is me, because it sounds like me, and maybe that's why I was so in love with it. But he sent me this idea, and that melody was very prominent in the idea, and I was like, okay, that melody is so good, I have to write on this right now. We have to make this a collaboration. And then he sent it over, and then I put my Julian Gray twist on it. Obviously, I added like the big pads and all of the stuff that sounds like me. We made it a little bit more like high energy, progressive sounding. And then 28 millimeter actually for years and years has been collaborating with this artist called Numa, who some of his biggest songs have been collaborations with her. And he reached out to her, and she's actually in a band called Forts, and it's her and another writer. And they were so enthusiastic about it, they turned around the song in like a day or two, which is really quick for a vocalist. So
Yeah.
they got back to us, and the track was perfect with the vocal on it. I think that it really made the record, and that's kind of how it came to be. It's just a lot of mutual friends that we've known over the years. I've known of Numa for years now, and it was so good to finally have her and her other member of Forts on the record.
And then I believe this is like the first song you put out officially in like a year, if that's correct.
It's been a minute.
I mean, has the pandemic affected that? Is it just you've been just like creatively, this is not it until you like finally find something? Like, is it a combination of all of that?
It's definitely not creative for me now. It's as I've grown into this larger artist. I don't want to say I'm like a huge artist, but there ends up being like politics to releasing stuff. Like now I have to wait 6 months to get a song out through a record label because they have to sign it, and then they have to have this period of time that between when it comes out and when it's signed. And I'm very bad at that. Like I'll sign a record and then it comes out 6 months later, but while I'm waiting for it to come out, I'm like put everything else on pause because I want to focus on that record. It's something I'm working on too, because I write music probably, you know, a few times a week. So I have a lot of material that's unreleased right now. And it just happens that a lot of the time, you know, I end up lapsing in time. Like I don't realize that it's been so long since I put out a song. Like I used to release music so often, and now that I'm releasing with labels all the time, it's very much, you know, put all of your energy and focus into reaching out to the label, getting it signed, getting it distributed, getting it in the schedule for their, you know, release year, and then focusing on promoting that single. One of the things I'm really trying to focus on now is to get back how I was in like 2017 or 16, where I was releasing music like every month or two. I will say I have a few more things planned for this summer. So hopefully I can break my stride of not putting out a lot of music this year.
And then, I mean, obviously working for a label like Mousetrap would be a dream, especially for you. I mean, I know how much Dead Mouse has meant to you, but I mean, with that, I mean, of course, it's no longer you're in control. You can release whenever you want. Because I mean, I make music occasionally, and I mean, I like that I can just put it out whenever I want, or it's just a few days it's out, like just because I want to, like just because the feeling's right. Do you miss being able to do that? Do you have any leverage in that? Are you able to do that in even a mini form, or do you miss like being fully independent in those ways?
Yeah, so my affiliation with Mousetrap is really on like a release by release basis. So sometimes I release stuff with them, sometimes I release with other labels, but my experience with labels is that, you know, there's always this process of waiting, whether it be Mousetrap or an Anjuna release or what have you. It's always like I sign the track and then 5 months later it comes out, and there's something to be said about, you know, independent releases where I can just stick it out. I'm, you know, really excited about it. And yeah, I do kind of miss that. I kind of miss the ability to just, you know, write something and then stick it out immediately. But there's parts of me that also don't, because then, like we were talking about a minute ago, sometimes there's regrets too. Like, I wrote that like in a day and I don't love it now. But you know, maybe a few years from now, I'll think about it in a different light. But yeah, I definitely miss the freedom of being able to stick something out whenever I want. But that's not to say, because I'm non-exclusive to any label right now. I just kind of am affiliated with a few, and that's not to say I couldn't put out an independent release. So maybe I will. Maybe you've inspired me to.
I hope I have. I mean, talk to me about that. You're affiliated with the labels, but you're not a full artist on the label, if that's correct. I mean, how does that compare to being like Mousetrap is my life? Like, how does that compare?
Yeah, so it's just kind of the way the electronic music industry has gone in the past few years. They don't really sign artists as much as they do releases. So you might sign an album, you might sign a single, you might sign a 2 EP deal where they take 2 of your EPs, and that's kind of just the way electronic music and truthfully the entire music industry has gone in the past few years. Is they don't want to take on exclusivity because then they're responsible for, you know, the losses too if it ends up not working out. So I think I mean, I'm actually happier that way because I'm free to, you know, I released this new track Air on a record label called Enhanced, and I released my previous record on Anjunabeats, and before that, my last EP was on Mousetrap. I just like to, because I'm such an eclectic writer, I like to write the music first and then find a label home for it that would match the energy and like the story of the record. And being non-exclusive kind of enables me to do that, because I feel like, I don't know if you've heard my record Static, which was my 2020 single of the year basically.
Yeah.
I don't feel as though that would have, you know, resonated as well on, you know, Enhanced or Mousetrap or any of the other labels. It fit perfectly to Anjunabeats. So I was, you know, I'm definitely thankful to have the freedom to be able to bounce around. But I think that that's the culture of electronic music labels right now, is that you don't really sign exclusively, you kind of sign records, and that works for me.
All right, cool. And then, you know, we talked about in the last interview the feeling you would have when you release a piece of music, and you know, you said, you know, don't quote me, but like I'm just basically like you're so on to the next thing. You're always you write a piece of music a week. You're so focused on like so many things. It's like, yeah, it's out, cool. You're releasing Air. It's like, I mean, how does that feel to like? I mean, first of all, it's been a year, so obviously it must feel good to at least put something out in the world again, or like,
Yeah.
are you able to take in the positive reception, or just that something's out in the world, or is it still like, I got like 5 other things? So just
Yeah, I think that was the 2015 Julian talking for sure. I mean, when I was, however old that was, 18 or 19, I was always in this content grind mindset where I was trying to create as much as possible and get it out there as possible. And I think that I attribute a lot of my success to that era of just, you know, putting out so much stuff that it's impossible to ignore me. Was my idea back then. And now I'm inspired more by album artists and artists that release very minimal amount of material, but the material that they do put out has like a world around it. It's, you get caught up in the energy and the aesthetic, for lack of a better word, of the release, and that's kind of where I'm at now. And I don't care to put out an absurd amount of music like I used to. Like 2017, I put out like 4 EPs or something. It was crazy. I don't do that as much now because I like to really dial in what the single means and like the world around it. I would rather build like a music video and a lyric video and like build an entire ethos around the single rather than just, you know, release it onto the next one next month. Because those sorts of things, to do it right, takes time. And that's something that I really didn't realize when I was 17. You know, I like to really get it finished regardless of how good it was. And now I'm like, let me just take like 6 months and focus on getting this really right, you know?
Yeah, a lot of what you're saying I relate to. It feels like I'm talking to myself in some ways.
Yeah.
At least my old self. Well, I'm still myself. It's hard to change those kind of aspects. But you mentioned like you songs in the past, how you relate to them. It's kind of a cycle. And I mean, obviously, I'm sure if I asked what your favorite project you've done is, it's probably like, no, Air is the best. Because I mean, that's kind of, I mean, it's true, but also like, of course, you're most proud and most focused on your most current release. But
Right.
Like, I mean, does that ring true? And I mean, aside from Air, like, is there a song or project that you still really hold in high regard?
Well, I would have
at least now.
Yeah, I would have to say my unreleased stuff that I'm working on
Okay.
is my proudest work, but I think that's true for any artist. The newest thing and the most exciting thing is always what you're currently working on. But out of all the things I've ever done, I mean, Air obviously is like the most exciting right now because it's what I just put out, and you know, it's what I really love right now. But you know, there's clear like milestones that I've put out that I really love. Like I had a track with the Canadian producer Deza a few years ago called Cold Outside. It's still my biggest single. I think it's like maybe like 3 million streams across platforms. And
It's great.
that one I'm really proud of. You know, it was a big record for both of us. And obviously my Mousetrap EPs were a really meaningful one to me when I was a younger producer. And my last year's release of Static, I mean, I have become to this point where I worked so heavily on each release that I'm equally proud of them all. So I guess that's a very like cheat code answer to your question, but kind of how I feel.
And then with your unreleased stuff, is there anything you can say in terms of how soon they're coming, if they're finished? Like,
I would expect, yeah, I would say I'd expect music by the end of the summer.
That's good enough for me.
That's all I will say.
And then, who are your major influences in music? Like, we talked about this last time. Like, who are your major influences in electronic music? But then, I mean, another way I relate to you, you're a big fan of Coldplay. So, like, you know, who inspires you in general? Because I feel like for me, a lot of artists, there's artists that inspire me directly. Like, this is how I write based on them, but also I just love these artists. There's
right.
no separation, like just specifically how they influence you. I mean, yeah.
I would have to say, I know that my answer from 2015 was Deadmau5. So I
had like
I would
10 different answers. And Deadmau5,
yeah, definitely. I would have to put him in my top 10 just because of his residual impact on me. Porter Robinson is a favorite right now. Someone I really fell in love with in like 2016 or 17. Madion is an incredible electronic producer that I love and respect a lot. There are some people in my circle that I really respect from a music perspective. Like Nomana is really cool. I'm trying to think of other examples here. In the electronic music space, I actually listen to a lot less electronic music than you would think now. It's evolved a lot into, you know, more alternative stuff, what I listen to now. Coldplay, but not as much. I listen to a lot of them around, you know, their older music, like 2014 and prior.
Yeah.
But I still admire a lot of what they do. I like American football. I like a lot of Radiohead, that sort of alternative music. Honestly, I listen to so much music across the board. The Beatles, Fleetwood Mac are staples in my catalog. It's too broad of a question, but those are some of my favorites right now.
Who's an artist you're really into currently? Like,
Porter Robinson. I really love his new record, Nurture.
I was going to ask. It's been like 7 years since his solo brand put out an album. I mean, how did you like that?
Oh, I think that Nurture is actually a better album than Worlds, which I never thought I would say.
I remember you saying he like changed the game. So it's like, is he still changing the game? Like,
I think so. I think that he might be, if I had to pick a singular favorite or like most influential artist right now, it's probably him. And I think a lot of producers would say that because he's pretty influential of you know what the landscape of electronic music is going. Yeah, I think the new record is just as influential, if not more, and I really love it. I have it on my old iPod.
That's awesome. I've heard a lot of good things. I've only heard the acoustic song. I forget what it's called, or acoustic aesthetic, but that one's really good.
It's a really pretty album and very like emotional. I love it.
And then I'm curious, I mean, how did you get into Deadmau5? I know like Deadmau5 and Skrillex are like, they paved the way for like 10 years ago where electronic music was going. And they're still influential, but it's like they paved the way for the early stages of like mainstream electronic music. So how did you get invested in Deadmau5 originally?
Yeah, I think I had a friend that was into his music in middle school or high school, like very early high school. And I fell in love with Deadmau5 and Skrillex from there. I'm proud to say that I knew Skrillex before Scary Monsters came out, which is when he really like took off.
Yeah.
I think I was into Daft Punk a lot before that, and Dead Mouse was like an obvious like next step, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's really interesting now because I have friends that I've made over the past years. Like Sophie's a really good friend of mine now. Like Sophie Needs a Ladder, and she always tells me these really amazing stories about, you know, Skrillex and Dead Mouse when they were just getting started, and it's profound to me because it feels like where I'm at or like where I was a few years ago, and you realize that, you know, these legends are just human beings, just like you, just had a really good opportunity or like a really good piece of work that made them what they are.
And a real quick side question. I mean, Daft Punk recently ended. I mean,
Heartbreaking.
Big surprise. I mean, how did that affect you personally, since you're such a big fan of them?
It, you know, it didn't hit me as bad as I thought it would. I definitely took a day or two to listen to like everything they've ever released. Of course, like all of us did. Watched all the live streams and stuff that from like 2007. I guess it wouldn't have been a stream. It would have been just like a recording. But I don't think it hit me as deeply as I thought it would because they've been so inactive since like 2013 or 14 or what have you. I mean, they've put out a handful of music, but handful of songs, I should say. But they aren't so active now, so it didn't hit me as deeply as I thought it would. Definitely hurts to think that I'll never see them live. That's always been like a dream.
And then you talked about how like a lot of people's inspiration heroes are just people who they just had a chance and they have a platform, but no different. I mean, you hear a lot of people who achieve success talk about like how they become, you know, friends with their heroes or friendly, or they become collaborators. I mean, and you said you followed Mousetrap and Anjuna for a long time, and now you get to work with them. I mean, I'm not sure like your personal like friendship with like Joel personally, Dead Mouse, but like, what is it like to work with them in that level, or to like know you've achieved enough success? Like, these are your colleagues now, and not just, you're not looking up, you're looking towards. Like,
it's definitely interesting. Like when you're looking from afar, you see like a totally different perspective from when you're looking from close up. Like you come to find that they're, like I've said, they're really just human beings, and it's not like disappointing necessarily, but it's very like it makes it real if they feel like real human beings. Yeah. So I don't see Joel in the same light that I would have like 5 years ago or 10 years ago, but I still respect his work a lot, and he's like, you know, a friend of friends. So it's very cool to work with a team that I aspired to, but in day-to-day practice it really doesn't feel like I'm doing anything different than what I was doing 5 years ago, you know. It's just with a different context. Yeah,
that's cool. And then onto some of these questions. They're not pressing. They're just like kind of rephrasing, like, you know, interesting questions from the other interview. But like you mentioned 2015, Julian, hard work makes talent. And if you're not giving everything to what you're doing, what are you doing? And I'm curious. And has that ideal strengthened over the years? Has it shifted? Like, how do you approach that specific way of thinking?
I think that I agree that work and practice is really how you get great at something. But I think 2015 Julian cared a lot less about his health and his like well-being in exchange for like grind and like work ethic. And I think that that's something that I've really realized over the past few years, that you do better work when you're slowing down. I think when you take time to make great work and practice the right things rather than, you know, hastily trying to learn everything and practice everything all the time. That's just, you know, I think you gain that as you get older anyway. A lot of people, like, you know, it's typical to slow down as you get older. And I'm starting to really realize that as I go here. I don't have the energy I once had to grind through 5 videos a week or whatever I used to do. And now I'm like, I'd rather make one really great video that's covering a topic that I would love and, be inspired by, than make, a video every day like I used to. And that kind of extends to everything. Like I can learn better when I have time to really learn something than to, just try to ingest knowledge every day. I still try every day to, learn a little something. But I'm not as like grindy as I once was.
It's interesting to hear you say that, because I remember we also talked, like, you're also a big believer in quality over quantity, but you were also so deep into quantity. I'm sure that has also shifted, context has shifted there as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think I believed in quality over quantity, but I was practicing like quantity over quality just based on how much I was doing, and maybe I thought that what I was doing was great, but looking back now, I'm like, I could have made these better if I just took more time on them. And that's just a realization you have as you get older. I think time is more valuable. Like taking a step back and trying to figure stuff out is better than trying to just force yourself to figure it out in the moment. But I still definitely believe that quality overrides quantity. There's a lot of great examples of that. Like one great piece of art is much more, I guess, successful than like 10 that are like lousy,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I also remember asking you, like, social media is obviously an important thing for any artist. And it's like, I think you've achieved a lot of success where you can stand above other people, but also I have you on Facebook and Instagram, you're very close to your fans, or you really pay respect. You give people the time of day, which, I mean, you still have that ability. And I'm curious, like, which social media, like, are you able to connect with your fans most, or like treasure the most in being able to do that?
Yeah, this is like interesting too, because this kind of plays into what I was talking about. And that 5 years ago, I really felt the need to respond to every comment. Like I would try my very best to get back to every comment. And you realize as you get older again that like getting a notification every 2 minutes is really like taxing.
Yeah.
So I still respond to, I would say, 80% of what I get. I just try to, centralize when I respond. I'm not trying to respond, as soon as a question comes up. I'll respond like all at once, one period of the day. But I definitely think that, you're doing a great service to yourself if you're connecting with people like that. People love to have friends and people that they can actually engage with. There's something to be said about brands that are just, distant and you can't reach them, and then they seem like valuable to talk to because of that. But I'm just not that kind of person. I'm very much a community first kind of guy.
And I feel like social media, I mean, it does the same thing, but I feel like they're more aimed to like present your work but keep you at a distance, whereas some, you're able to connect people more. I mean, where are you able to talk to people the most? Like, I mean,
I feel like such an old guy saying this, but I feel this very much with like Facebook. And I know like the Gen Z kids are like cringing right now, but I connect better with people on Facebook and platforms where I can write like a story, not limited to a certain amount of characters or a 15-second video clip. So I think that where I connect best with people is like Facebook. One of the newer ones is Discord. I enjoy that sometimes, just talking to people in a chat room or whatever. But I don't love like, TikTok and Snapchat and stuff. I feel as though I feel disconnected when I'm just sending you a 2-second video or whatever. So if anybody out there wants to, oh yeah, I appreciate what they are for like the people that use them. I don't like understand the appeal personally as like someone who's been using social media for like better part of 20 years.
Okay.
So I just feel more in touch with Facebook and that kind of era. So yeah, if anybody out there wants to get in touch with me, the best way is like, Facebook message or Instagram. I'm really active on too. I tweet a lot, just like to get my ideas out there, and I don't really respond. So you can see my unconscious conscious train of thought on Twitter. But yeah, I would say if you really want to connect with me and really get to know me, Facebook is where I'm most active.
Gotcha. And of course, the most important question, obviously, what is your advice for any musicians, creators, creatives who just starting out or want to be in a position you're in? Just what did you say, and especially with the 6 more years of experience you've had in the field?
Yeah. I would say the most important thing is to really be yourself and create art and content that you really believe in. And I think that people can see when you're doing something that you truly love to do and you're trying to help people and trying to connect people, people will believe that, and then they'll start understanding your vision and what you want to do. If I had to start over from scratch, I would be doing things very similarly to what I'm doing now and what I did in the start, just creating a community around what I do and trying to connect people with similar views and perspectives, just to who all believe in like a common vision or dream. I think that that's like the most important thing. I think don't pay too much attention to like optics and numbers and stuff, because it's a very unhealthy measurement of your value. I think great work and great art speaks for itself, and people will respect that.
That's a perfect anecdote to end on, I guess. But
yeah,
I mean, I could talk to you for hours, but this is the end of the interview, and I really appreciate you coming back 6 years later.
I appreciate you having me back. I'm so excited to review how the conversation has changed from now and then.
I am as well. I mean, I've always kept up with your work since then, so it's one thing to like know you're doing well, but to be able to talk to you face to face is another thing. So it's really cool. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, and thank you again for having me. I'm excited to see how I react.
Is there anything you want to say, promote, shout out for the people watching?
Go stream Air at stream-air.com and be on the lookout for new music. I think I'm going to release something by the end of the summer.
I can't wait. Well, this is Julian Gray. This is Mitchell Matthews. Julian Gray Media, Mitchell Matthews Media.
I know. And, hey, guys.
But yeah, we'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching, and thank you again.
Cheers. Thanks.